Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 62.
Fathers have a hugely important role in the home. I think probably the biggest thing that a father can do is to be present, to be there for your kids, and to simply emanate the love for your kids that they need.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Dustin Harris. Dustin Harris was born and raised in Southeast Idaho. He's the entrepreneur and owner of several small businesses. He's a real estate appraiser, business coach, and father of 4 homeschooled children. More importantly, he is the husband to one of our past guests, Cammie Harris. He's a personal friend and an excellent mentor for fathers. Welcome, Dustin. Okay, so here we are with Dustin Harris. This is actually an in-studio interview because Dustin is a podcaster himself, and so he wanted to come out and check out our equipment, and he's a good friend of ours, and so we've just been chatting away. But this is part of our Father's Day special where we talk to dads about their role in homeschooling. Anyway, so welcome, Dustin. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. It's really good to be with you. No, you kind of covered it. I'm a very, very busy guy. I enjoy being busy. So, like you mentioned, I run multiple businesses, and I love to teach, love to coach other people, and share knowledge and information with others. So that's been kind of more than just a hobby of mine. It's been kind of my business focus and goals as far as that goes as well. But we keep busy at home as well. Very busy household with 4 kids that are all homeschooled.
Great. So what was your personal educational experience?
I grew up in a very public school environment, as many people have, many homeschoolers have. And it wasn't a bad experience. I had a good experience in public schools, but to be honest with you, I learned how to exploit loopholes. That was about the extent of my education. In other words, I learned what my teachers wanted, and I did the bare minimum to get by. I got my little piece of paper. I went on to college. I found the loopholes in college and did the same thing there. And then I went on to graduate school, and I learned that there's loopholes in graduate school as well. And so I basically learned to play the game and walked away without much of an education at all.
Are there loopholes in business?
We won't go there. No, there are, and loopholes sometimes is a bad word, but there's a system, and there's ways to work within the system to make things work to your advantage, and I'm one that finds opportunities wherever I turn, whether it be schooling or business or relationships or any number of things, and just try to be successful in the system that we're given.
Great. So why did your family choose to homeschool?
Rebecca, I've listened to your podcast, and I know that you refer to yourself as an accidental homeschooler, and I would, I guess, put our family in that same category. We started out, our oldest, by the way, is 17, and our youngest is 7. When our daughter, our oldest, was very young, she went through the kindergarten and first grade situation in the public schools, and we thought that, that's just how you do things. You go through the public school system. That's what all our neighbors were doing. That's what my wife and I both did. We decided that that's what people do. And so without much forethought, we put our kids through the public schools, or started putting our daughter through the public school system, and learned very quickly that the light that she had, the desire to learn and thrive and grow, was quickly dying. And it wasn't that we had a bad system. We had a good school, good teacher. It just, the public school system is what it is. You've got 30 kids in a classroom, and you kind of have to teach to the middle of that, and she was kind of excelling on the high side of that. And so, to sit there and do busy work and worksheets and not really learn the things that she wanted to learn was very, very discouraging, both to her and to us. And so we decided we were going to look for other opportunities. And we first started looking at private schools and found out that they were very, very expensive. and a lot of them didn't really meet the criteria we were looking for anyway. And so we looked into charter schools and specifically helped form and be a part of growing a charter school. And while we were waiting for that, we decided that we would homeschool for a year because the charter school was not up and going yet. We were still in the development stage. And so my wife decided that, hey, I can homeschool for 1 year. She definitely couldn't see beyond the 1 year mark, but I can do this for 1 year until we get into the charter school, and then we'll put her into that and we'll move forward. Well, the first few months were pretty rough. And then about month 3 or 4, a light really turned on in my wife's eyes, and she kind of found her mission in life. And it's been mostly uphill from there. She loves to homeschool, and I love to be a support role.
Great. So what is your role in homeschooling your kids?
You know, I have to give deference to my wife here. She definitely is the homeschool mom, and she's the homeschool parent. She does all of the planning and the teaching and everything that goes into homeschooling. And, you know, I look up to her a great deal because, you know, her job never ends. The nice thing about my job is I can go at 9, return at 5, and be gone. A mom's role is much different. She's always a mom, and she's always a homeschool mom. And so she does most of the teaching. Now, I have an opportunity to support her, to give her encouragement, but I also have an opportunity, a unique opportunity, because I am self-employed. I can somewhat make my own schedule. And for the past couple of years, I have done my best to make sure that I take Fridays off. And what that does is allow me to be home, to be a homeschool dad. So my wife takes Friday and most of Saturday to prepare her lessons for the next week. And I have an opportunity to teach our youngest kids their homeschool lesson on Friday morning. And so I'm involved every Friday teaching them, and my wife is able to prepare her lessons. But, you know, like I said, she does most of the homeschooling, and I'm simply supportive in that role.
And how has your paradigm or educational philosophy changed over time? I think it's awesome that you encourage her. I mean, as obviously it looks like it was Cammie's idea. One of the questions I do get from dads, and maybe we'll kind of come back to the one I just asked you, but can a husband, I hear a lot of husbands that want their wives to homeschool. I mean, how do you get your wife to homeschool?
You know, here's a funny thing. I have to tell you a story on that. I used to be a teacher, not a public school teacher, but I taught public school kids. So without getting into all the details as to how that came about, basically I was, for reasons of understanding, let's just say I was a public school teacher. And in that role, I had opportunity for homeschool kids to come to my class. You know, for the most part, I was teaching public school kids, but every once in a while I had a homeschool kid that would come in as well. And I don't know if it was just luck of the draw or what, but the stereotypes that we sometimes get with homeschool students were very much true in these couple situations. And so it only fed into my bias, if you will, against homeschoolers. Homeschoolers are weird, they are socially inept, and, you know, all the things that you hear. And so when my wife decided to homeschool, I was adamantly against it. I mean, I thought, I do not want my kids to be weird. I do not want my kids to be socially inept. You know, so when you ask, how do you get your spouse to to homeschool, I was against it. So I guess the best way to do it is you know, use reverse psychology. Tell them you don't absolutely in any way want them to homeschool, and then they'll move forward. So, but I will say this, you know, all joking aside, very glad that we decided to homeschool. It has been a huge blessing to our family.
So obviously your paradigm's changed a little over
time. A lot. So something interesting that happened to me, because I was a public school product, and that is just how things happened. I knew that's the way that we were going to do things as a family, just because that's the way everybody else did them. When we started to slip into this other role of being homeschool parents, something happened to me as well, and my paradigm with education shifted greatly. I decided that in my mind, and this really wasn't a conscious effort, it just happened, in the sense that instead of just finding loopholes and getting through the system, I learned to really, really love learning. The first thing I fell in love with was history, specifically American history, and we got rid of TV at this point in our lives, just for, you know, whatever reason, decided we were wasting too much time there, so we got rid of that, and that created a vacuum. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do with myself now that I can't watch American Idol and whatever else on the television? And so I turned to books, and I developed a love for the Founding Fathers and their history and how the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all of these things came about. And I read all of the founding documents that you can imagine, and the histories and the biographies and the Federalist Papers, and I learned that there was anti-Federalist papers that I'd never heard about, and I just fell in love with that and learned so much. And all of a sudden, a light switch came on, and I thought, you know what? I love education. I love learning things. It was something I'd never learned in my whole life. I hated education. My goal was always to get to the end of the class or get to the end of the year or get to the end of the degree. Exactly. Yeah. Get the piece of paper, put the certificate on the wall and say, hey, look what I did. But learning was never really a part of it. And so my biggest change in philosophy over time has been learning to love education for what education is.
That is great. So what advice would you give to dads if they have a wife that decides to do something so crazy?
I think the best, and I've talked to a lot of homeschool dads, and most of them are great. A few of them were kind of like me in the beginning, and maybe sometimes that continues on down the road, and that is some of them are not as supportive as they could be. Maybe they're against the homeschooling, or maybe they think, hey, that's mom's job.
And one of the complaints that I've heard is that they get tired of not coming home to this perfectly spotless house with the meals perfectly done all the time.
Oh, I would know nothing about that. My wife meets me at the door with a awesome pie and and everything's perfectly clean every day. No, I know what you're talking about there, and that's part of being supportive. Understanding that. Your wife is not there to clean the house all day. Your wife is doing the most important job that she can do, and that is educating your kids. And so to help being supportive of her, and, I think the best thing that a spouse can do, and this would be the spouse that's not the primary homeschool teacher, is to listen to their spouse, to take time often to talk, and to, where is so-and-so on their educational path, and where do we want her or him to be. Just be a sounding board and be supportive of what your spouse is doing.
Great. It sounds like it could improve your marriage if you decide to take that role, too.
Well, my marriage is perfect right now, so I really don't even know what it means really to improve. Yeah. We've got everybody fooled.
So what do you think about socialization? I mean, you talked about your kids being weird. Right, and what do you think it means to be socialized?
I think this is probably the biggest misunderstanding of homeschool that I had for a long, long time, and I think a lot of people have, is that, that homeschoolers are weird, that they're backward, that they don't know how to interact with people. I spend time, most of my friends, or most of my children's friends are homeschool students, and I have to tell you, I'm impressed with these kids. They know how to interact with adults. I mean, it's so amazing to go to church or different functions that deal primarily with people that are not homeschooled. And, some of them are great, some are wonderful. I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush, but there is a marked difference between people that are homeschooled and those that aren't, in the sense that, the politeness, the thank you for letting me come over, Mr. Harris. I mean, do you see that kind of thing in a public school environment? I don't see that very often. And it's amazing. These kids, they're not weird. They're very socially apt and can handle themselves quite well. But I do think it is important that kids socialize. I mean, people in general, humans are social creatures.
It's good for our psyche.
Absolutely. Even an introvert like myself, and when I tell people that I'm an introvert, they don't believe that, but it honestly is true. I get more energy sitting at home reading a book in front of the fire all alone than I do going to a social activity. So I think on a scale, I'm very in the middle, but lean more towards the introvert side of things. And even an introvert like myself need to get interaction, need to socialize with others. Let me, if I can, just tell a quick story about my wife. Several years ago, she came to me and she said, I have a vision of a common school. And I said, who? What is that? And she had to explain to me what that term meant. And I may even be pronouncing it wrong now. I can't remember for sure what it's called. But a mom school.
Commonwealth
school. There you go. School. Yeah, and a mom school. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she explained to me that she had this vision of one day a week coming to a facility and, different moms taking classes or teaching classes and different students coming and interacting and this wonderful opportunity, not only for education, but also for socialization. And she started down this path. She just knew this is something she needed to do. And honestly, she got a little bit of backlash in the beginning, and she, educated others and helped to sell them on the vision of what this could become. And out of that came this thing called the iFamily, which is an opportunity for moms in the area to come together and to have their kids come together. And the socialization that occurs there is awesome, but it's much, much more than just socialization. It's the opportunity to grow and develop and to receive a real education. And now, there's so many...
My kids, and just to kind of add, they love the feedback that they get on books that they're reading. It's one place that they've been able to go where they can have intelligent conversations with other kids their age, where their learning is so important to them, because they see that. I mean, they're teased by some of their peers that don't like school, some of their public school peers, because they don't necessarily love school. And that's what they love about iFamily, is all the kids that come do love it, and they have intelligent conversations with people.
Right.
Maybe that's why they're weird.
That may be true. But, I'm proud of my wife. She put this vision into motion, and I need to, make sure that nobody misunderstands. Obviously, there was a ton of people that were involved, but my wife was kind of the vision behind this thing, and truly the one that pushed it forward in the beginning, and with a lot of help from other people, put this together. And now they're bursting at the seams. There's so many people involved in iFamily, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful environment for the kids to be involved in.
I feel bad I didn't get involved sooner, because it is a great experience.
Before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors.
Hey Firestarters, this is Mark, producer of The Luminous Mind. If you're like me, the thought of going out to the store and shopping is enough to make you want to crawl in a hole and hide. If that's you, then do your shopping online through Amazon. Just go to theluminousmind.net, click on the Amazon link, and shop away. Also, most of the books and resources that Rebecca and her guests discuss can be found on our Amazon links as well. Again, if you're like me, you have already accidentally signed up for Amazon Prime. So most of those purchases should have free shipping as well. Good luck!
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Dustin Harris, a father's role in homeschooling.
What would you say is the most important role for a father in the home?
Oh, wow. That's a deep question. I think probably the way that I would answer that, Rebecca, is that fathers have a hugely important role in the home. I think probably the biggest thing that a father can do is to be present, to be there for your kids, and to simply emanate the love for your kids that they need. Now, I have to tell you, that is, for me, the hardest thing to do. I'm not naturally, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not naturally outgoing. And so it takes some effort. It takes some mental effort and some gymnastics even for me to, when my kid needs me, and, I'm a very busy person. And so to take the laptop off my lap and actually sit down and look them in the eye and say, hey, what's going on, takes some effort for me. And I think that's probably the best thing the father can do, is just take time for their kids.
Tell us some of the obstacles that you've had and what you've learned from them.
As a small business person, I have I've had to learn that failure is a huge part of success. You've heard the stories that Michael Jordan, got cut from his basketball team in high school, and that Thomas Edison had to go through thousands of, prototypes before he finally got the light bulb that actually worked. And all of these stories that help you to realize that failure is a huge part of success, that you have to fail so many times before you'll find a success. And, I've learned to just make failure a part of my life. I've learned through some very difficult challenges financially and time-wise, things that I just dump my life into, and then 3 years later we close shop and move on to the next idea. It's a hard lesson to learn sometimes, but I've learned that that's what life is all about, is what can I learn from this experience, and how is that going to make me come to the next level and be successful at the next thing I try.
Great. Dustin, can you tell us how men can best help their wives and children?
We talked a little bit about this earlier, but if I can kind of amend a little bit of what I said, and that is just being able to talk and be involved with your kids' lives. So let me give you an example. One of the goals that my wife and I set in the very beginning of our marriage, I think even before we had children, was that we would constantly, on a regular basis, take time, first of all, for each other, that we would date each other, even well into marriage, and I'm proud to say, have continued to do that. It's very rare that we don't get a weekly date together. But as kids started to come, we realized the importance of being involved in their lives on that same level. And so we, on a regular basis, take opportunity to be involved with our kids one-on-one, not as a group, but one-on-one. In other words, I might take my youngest, my 7-year-old, out bowling or, to a treat or something like that, and that's been very, very helpful. The other thing that we try to do in our home as well is we are religious as a family, and so we try to make and mix our religion with our family and our social life as a family, in the sense that we pray about our children by name and specifically about their problems and the difficulties that they may be having, and trying to receive that inspiration, if you will, from on high as to how to deal with each of their problems and their difficulties. So, the most thing I would say is take time, but be involved. You have to be involved in your kids' lives and your wife's life as well, your spouse's life.
Well, and I think the dating, I know by the time Friday comes around, I'm ready to get out
Aren't we though?
And not have baby spit on me. Not that I have baby spit, but anyway, and dress up and feel like I'm a regular person too.
Right,
so that's a great thing to do. So what are some successes that you've seen?
I think as a dad, what I look to as major successes have really been more minor in nature, because I really think it is the minor successes that create the major ones. And what I mean by that is, when I look back on what successes I've had as a father, I don't look to the time that my daughter won a gold medal or my son won this trophy or completed this great project. To me, what is very meaningful as a dad is to take that laptop off my lap, sit down, play a game of chess with my kids, and just have them say, "Thanks, Dad." Or, know that my daughter's having a difficult time. She might be downstairs in her room crying. And instead of doing what I want to do, and that is ignore her and be on the computer, is try to put that aside and go down and softly knock on her door and say, "Hey, can I come in and talk?" And just sit on her bed and chat with her for an hour and just let her talk. And that, to me, is the most success that I've found as a dad.
Well, and to go along with successes, what are some personal habits that you have that you think help make you successful?
That's a good question. I am a big believer in making sure that you make things habitual in your life that will cause success. So let me give you an example. I, on a regular basis, will take time for myself. And some would call that selfish, and I would say that that's no more selfish than pulling into the gas station and filling up your car with fuel. I'm a big believer that you have to take time for yourself so that you can rejuvenate your spirit and your ability to take care of things. And so I, on a regular basis, will do that. I think that's important. But as a homeschool dad, I think it's really important to make sure that my kids know, number one, that I love to read, that I love to learn, that they see me reading, that they see me learning. And I love questionings. The Socratic method is so important in the home, that you don't just tell your kids what they should believe, but that you ask them questions. One of my favorite times is after church on Sunday, when we sit around as a family and have dinner together. And my kids know what's coming every Sunday as I go one by one and say, "What did you learn in church today?" And it's more than just, "Oh, nothing," or "We learned about Jesus." It's what did you learn about Jesus? And why do you think your teacher said this? And do you believe that? Or do you think there's some other way to look at that? And just ask these questions that allow them to dig deep into their soul so that they can learn and grow just beyond the surface.
That's great, because the questions really do spark more learning on their end. That's great. So how do you organize your time with family and your activities and your job and everything?
Wow, bad question for me. Because I have to admit, I'm not very good at it. I believe in structure, and I'm a very structured person, but I'm really bad at doing what I should do when I should do it, in the sense that I'm a driver. I'm a guy that likes to get things done. And so, even though I talk a big game in this interview about, hey, we should really take time for our kids and really take time for our spouse, if you asked any of my kids or spouse, they'd say, "Yeah, Dad's on his computer a lot," or "Dad's working a lot." And
that's hard when you're an entrepreneur in your home, too.
It is. But I've learned to, at 5:30, sometimes I just need to divorce myself from work a little bit and make sure that I'm present. In other words, I know what's important. Doing it is a whole different story.
Yeah, That's how everyone feels. So how has your family benefited the most from homeschooling?
This is what I love about homeschooling, is the freedom that it gives you to do whatever. Now, I'm probably a bigger proponent of this than my wife is. In other words, I feel like we should be, traveling to Belize every other month and doing all these things on the road. But my wife is also a very structured person, and I think most of her success in homeschooling has been the fact that she is structured, that we start at 9 o'clock and we do this, and this, and she tries really hard to make sure that people do not step on her toes as far as her time goes, which I respect, and my hat goes off to her that she's able to be so strict as far as that goes. And I think that's where the success comes from. But
you've got to let people, and this is like a part-time job. You can be answering the phone.
Or a full-time.
Babysitting, yeah, exactly. Babysitting other people's children whenever.
It is funny. People will call people in the neighborhood and, hey, can you take a dinner to so-and-so? And, sometimes comments will be made like, well, you stay at home. Can you do this? As if she has nothing to do but sit around and wait for the phone to ring.
Yeah, they wouldn't dare ask a teacher. Call them up in the middle of their class and, hey, you've already got kids there. Why don't you take 3 or 4 others? So.
Right.
So what are some long-term goals that you have for yourself and your family?
I define wealth maybe a different way than a lot of people do. When I talk about success, when I talk about wealth, I'm not talking about monetization so much, even though that's part of it. My definition of success, or my definition of wealth, is that we have the freedom to do whatever we need to do when we want to do it. So that can, come in the form of time. It can come in the form of money. It can come in the form of relationships. It can come in the form of health. There's so many aspects of our lives that go into that. And so my goal is to have more freedom. I love the idea of freedom. I love the principles centered around freedom and the ability to choose and to not be held captive either by money or health or time or relationships, that we have opportunity to reach forward. So a lot of my goals center around more freedom for both myself and my family.
Great. So what advice or encouragement would you give to fathers kind of just starting out in this process?
Don't make mom do it all. And I think it's easy, just to say, hey, you know what? She's the homeschool teacher and I'm the entrepreneur, or I'm the breadwinner and she stays at home with, with the kids, or vice versa. Maybe the mom works and the dad stays home. But it's easy to slough it off on the quote unquote homeschool parent, the teacher, and say that it's their responsibility. And I just think that's the wrong way to go about it. My wife would probably tell you that that's probably what I do most of the time, but maybe not. I'm hoping that she sees that I try to support her where I can. I think that's the biggest advice I'd give the fathers is make sure that you're supportive and that you are helpful toward whatever spouse is the teacher.
One of my favorite things that my husband does is he'll come in and he's never said like something to me to the effect of like, what did you do all day? He's always just looked around. And like if he sees me struggling in the middle of trying to get dinner done or whatever, he the first question he always asks is, how can I help? And that's the first thing he says. So I think that's great when dads can do that. How do you think society can value men more? This is one area that I really want to try to take my podcast to, the fact that men are really important, and I think our society we've gotten to the point where women think they can do it all and that we don't need men, and a lot of that is really sinking in for men, and I want to know how we can make them feel more valued and want to be part of what we're doing.
Wow, that's a really, really big question. I don't know that I can answer it completely, because what's in my heart and head are probably different than what's going to come out of my mouth. But, I would say that I would even take that to an individual level, meaning, yes, men are important, but so are women and so are children. And I just think the individual is so important. And if we can just focus on individuals, I think that's the key, is that we're focused on individuals and what their talents and abilities and, participation can be in anything that we try and do. That we try to value those individuals, dads included, to make sure that they understand that this is not just it's so easy to move into our own roles. I do the budget, my wife cooks the bread. I do this and she does that. Or, this is my role and my oldest daughter's role is here. In general, I think that's fine, but I also understand that we all have to be involved in each other's lives.
You got to adapt a little.
Absolutely.
when you see the need. Great. So how would you like to see the world change in the future?
I'm a big educator. I love teaching. As I mentioned earlier, I love coaching other people. And I find that one of the coolest things that's going on in life right now is technology, the internet, and just so many opportunities for education, long distance, if you will.
Well, and very individualized, too.
Absolutely.
Where we can't just take 30 kids and they're all learning the same thing. Let's use technology to teach everyone at their own level.
Yeah, YouTube is big. I'm a, as you mentioned, I'm a podcaster myself, but not only do I podcast, but I love listening to podcasts. I listen to so many different podcasts. What I love about podcasting is that it's so specific. It's so niche. I can find a podcast on any subject that I'm interested in, and I don't have to wade through a lot of commercials. I don't have to wade through a lot of fluff that doesn't really apply to me. It can be very, very individualized to the education that I'm looking for. And I just love that. And I see that going so far into the future where we have no excuse for not growing and educating ourselves because the opportunities are just abundant.
Great. So is there any parting words of advice or maybe a favorite quote that you'd like to share?
Wow. Yeah, let me just reach into my sage mind here and give you my words of advice. And I guess listeners, they can take this for what it's worth because it's free advice. So there you go. It's worth what you're paying for it. But one of the things that I've learned in the last, probably more poignantly in the last 18 months than I've ever in my whole life learned, is the opportunity and the blessing of questioning. And I've really started to question everything in my life, from my relationships to my businesses to even to religion, looking at the world through a different lens. Just because you were raised one way,
we get really stuck in our traditions.
It's easy to do that. I think as human nature is just to say, you know what, this is the way it is because this is the way it's always been. But I look at the greats of the world, and I love to study successful people. When I say successful, remember, this isn't just rich people. This is people that I think really made a difference in life. I look at the lives of Gandhi and Martin Luther and the founding fathers and so many people from across, just a wide group of religions and societies and countries and in familial situations. And I find that one of the things that really sticks out to me as being a huge ingredient to success is the opportunity to question, to step back, and to not just accept whatever you read or whatever you hear over the pulpit. One of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Jefferson. He said, "Question with boldness even the existence of God, because if there be one, he must more approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear." I love that.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's so easy to say, you know what, it's true because so-and-so said it was true, and so-and-so is a cool guy, and so-and-so knows a lot. Or I read it here, and everybody says this is a great book, so it must be accurate, it must be true. I think there's so much benefit to, number one, as a parent, questioning everything, and then passing that on to our children and saying, you know what, just because you heard it in church doesn't mean that it's right. What do you think?
Yeah, go study it out.
Exactly. Yeah, find out for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of where my educational philosophy has been, is that questions are good, and I don't think God, looks down upon us when we question. He actually likes those people who, look at life and want to know more. But
well, and what is faith? If you define faith, part of that definition has to include a little bit of the unknown, because otherwise it's not faith anymore, it's knowledge. And so I love the opportunity to have faith in things that we don't completely know, which are true, but again, that we don't completely know. And it's okay to question, and it's okay to say, well, what if? And what about this? And I know my teacher said this, but boy, that doesn't really set right with me. I love to teach my children to question everything, because I think questioning will drive us to success a lot faster than just blindfolded acceptance of anything that we hear.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much. This has been fun. It's been fun having you in the studio.
This is awesome. Yeah.
Other than I had to shower and put some makeup on.
I can verify her hair is done, everyone. No, this has been great, Rebecca. I really appreciate you inviting me in. You've got a wonderful setup here. I love your show. Love what you're doing for those, especially those who are considering homeschooling and don't really know what it's all about. I would just say, those of you who are considering homeschooling, it is not easy, and the first part of it is much more challenging than it will eventually get.
Yeah.
But it is worth the hurdles and the difficulties that you will experience in the beginning, because the payoff is awesome.
Yeah. Well, and if you do the hard things at the beginning, then it's easier at the end.
Absolutely.
Than the other way around, I think sometimes we want to take the easy way at the beginning when the kids are young, and then all of a sudden all these problems come up in their teenage life, and sometimes if you put the hard work in first, you come out with a better product.
Absolutely.
But thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Dustin Harris, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Also, be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list so you can receive notifications for our weekly audio blog, The Spark. We would love to have you join our program. Do so by going to the scheduling tab and become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website, theluminousmind.net. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.